Hello, and welcome to our video contemplation of day signature 45. This frequency corresponds with the Ace of Wands and the wand virtue of story. The two angels represented by this frequency are the Angel of Eloquence and the Angel of Nobility.
Yes, so we have the 23rd Angel of Eloquence that walks the pathway of simplicity to become the embodiment of heart. And the 45th Angel of Nobility walks the pathway of ownership to become the embodiment of the king.
Oh, yeah. We were reminiscing, finding these words earlier this morning, and one of the angels that we spent quite a bit of time searching for the proper words for was the 45th angel. The 45th angel was a sticking point for some time.
Yeah, really understanding that pathway.
That was the main thing.
It's like, how do you get to the king?
Yeah. What was the word? It took us a while to find it. We looked in a lot of different directions, and even once we found it, we knew it was right. You can always tell when it locks in, but it had us scratching our heads until it clicked.
Right.
You know?
It's like we know there's more to this idea of ownership, and we knew it would reveal itself.
Mm-hmm. And it did, the more we contemplated it, even at the time. But already now, arriving at this moment where we get to meet this energy in this day,
right.
It's really been kind of revealing itself even more.
Absolutely.
So we're excited to dig into all of these different details of the day signature that we meet here today. Maybe the best place to begin is with the ace.
Okay.
Because here we've moved through the entire noble family of wands. Yesterday we met the Angel of Wands, the first of the four angels that we've met in this format. And now we initiate a new process as we move through the set of virtues that we refer to as wands. The first virtue that we meet along the way is the wand virtue of story. This is in the Ace of Wands. Now, each of these members we're going to move through, from the Ace into the 2, into the 3, all the way up to 10, are going to carry a certain theme or keynote based on the member type itself. For example, all of the aces, whether it's an Ace of Swords or an Ace of Wands or an Ace of Hearts or an Ace of Diamonds, all of those aces are going to carry a particular theme by virtue of being an ace. We've enjoyed sharing these keynotes that we've worked with internally so that you can kind of expand your contemplation of these different energies as well. So we'll do that again. We're very surprised to admit that the keynote we had applied to the ace long before we realized which of the angels was connected to it. One of the keynotes is ownership.
Yes, so it's like doubling down on this theme of ownership today. We see it in the 45th angel. We also see it in the ace.
Yes. The two keynotes that we have for the ace are beginnings, right?
Which is definitely like a traditional meaning of the aces.
Yeah, obviously it's beginning a new sequence in this new category of the virtues. It's the first of these virtues. So we can see that there is a traditional connection between kind of new beginnings and the ace itself. So we realize whatever we meet here is going to be initiating something. But that word ownership is something that we were surprised to find when we initially connected it to the ace.
Definitely.
And we're even more surprised to find this morning when we could see this theme of ownership kind of doubled up. We didn't see that coming. Today was the first time we ever noticed.
Yeah.
But it's that very theme that evaded us initially. And it absolutely does deserve a little bit of explanation. We want to expand on that so that each of you can have at least as firm of a grasp on what we intend by the word as we do. And I think in conversation we'll learn more, and in listening you'll see perhaps even further than we have. We're just excited to share what we've got. Yeah. So we've got the Ace of Wands, whole new movement here. We're at the beginning of that new movement. We know that we're dealing with the wand virtue of story.
Right.
Maybe that's where we go next. Just describe a little more about what we mean by story.
Yeah, I mean, I think because we are in this position of the ace, where it's about ownership, and also wands, which is about vigor and expression. This is this point in the sequence where we're understanding that we're part of a story. We have a story. We have a story to tell. We have a story to live. And I think that's really the essence of the Ace of Wands. The idea of story is something that we have to take ownership of and then live it out and enjoy it. All of these things, we have to look at our story as something that we're proud of, and we're ready to sort of like take up the torch and like walk the path. Yes.
Well, the icon you may have noticed on our website that we use for the virtues is like a runner with a torch. Very much representative of what we feel in this energy. But if I were to pluck my favorite words from what you just shared, they would be 3 simple words. Live it out. Live it out. Yeah. It surprised us to find story here. We had moved through most of the swords and the sword virtues, kind of expecting that if story were to show up anywhere, it would show up there in the mind. Because we're constantly imagining, we're constantly engaging with inner narratives, with story. Of course, however, we find it here in the wands. The reason that we can see for this is that in the swords, we're cultivating the capacity to refine the quality of our inner narratives. But those inner narratives must be practiced to such a point. They must become so large within us that they become inevitable to live out, that they must be lived out. This idea of story is a real living, breathing thing. It isn't, in fact, just an idea, it's an action. So story in this context is about your behavior. It's about not only who you are perceiving yourself to be, but who you are demonstrating yourself to be. It's about your decision-making processes. You can sit in meditation claiming through mantra that I am large, I am powerful, all of these beautiful things. But if you then move into life and make small decisions, fear-based decisions, if you act small, it doesn't matter what your thoughts or words are doing. There's an opportunity here, in particular in the Ace, to begin to draw down the benefit of all that inner work we've done in the mind, to draw it down into our feet, to put it into action. That's really what this story is about. This is a living story.
Yeah, it's definitely also, I think, a point in the sequence where we can really start to see how our thoughts and our beliefs become real things, are actual entities, and must be made manifest, like in some shape or form. They are alive, so they have to be, brought to fruition in some way.
Fruition is a 45.
Yeah, that's right. The frequency of that word is 45.
Yeah, and fruition, if you recall, is the theme of this month's signature. So I like that. Must, you said, if I could remember exactly, it was like it must be brought to life, or it is be brought to manifestation. It will be. That's the interesting thing about this. We don't realize necessarily that this mechanism is at play. So when we become aware and we start to practice better stories internally, it may be kind of disorienting at first to realize that those larger mental narratives aren't necessarily immediately or directly translating to experience. The reason for this is that those old stories that you've received, ingested, integrated, allowed to become a part of you have been so well practiced for so very long that they are in fact larger than the beautiful stories you are now telling. In order to enact those more beautiful stories in life, 2 things need to happen. The first is that they need to become extremely large in your own mind. You need to become capable of whittling away everything that is not equal to the scale of your new story internally. And then you need to become capable of doing something with the story you're instituting. Those 2 things accelerate the process of replacement as you essentially remove that which is not ideal, that which does not serve you, and replace it with that which is.
Yeah.
It's a process, though.
Yeah.
And so this is a part of what we're doing very intentionally, very proactively. It's what we're doing every day. It's the point of the Crystal Self Odyssey. It's the point of the Chronicle. It's the point of the Frequency Portal. It's to provide this mechanism by which we can begin to build up an inner narrative which is capable of supporting a whole new way of being in life. Mm-hmm. But it's only the first step. We need to practice and repeat and get that thing running like a broken record in our own inner world so profoundly and so regularly that it becomes inevitable, as you said, mm-hmm. to live it out.
Yep.
It will be lived out. Whichever story is largest within you, whatever you most firmly believe, will be lived out, will manifest.
Yeah.
It's guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing here is consciously replacing those things we don't want to play out with those things we do want to play out. It's fairly simple in this regard.
Mm-hmm. It is simple,
mm-hmm.
but it also takes conviction.
Simple and easy are not equal.
Yeah.
They're not the same all the time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's simple, but it's going to require something. It's going to require practice. It may require training. That's the whole point of seer training, mm-hmm. is to continually refine our not only mental processes, but our decision-making processes, our holistic way of being in life, in such a way that we can begin to produce the paradise we are so very conscious of.
Mm-hmm.
We want it to become real, and it will, provided we meet our lives moment by moment as an opportunity to live up into a larger story. Mm-hmm. But it is about living up into the larger story, not just engaging with this fantasy, but choosing mm-hmm. to meet life differently.
Right.
A very, very different thing. A lot of people find it very difficult initially to get out of that fantastic thinking. And it's a part of why it's so easy to shrug all this off as too good to be true. Because positive thinking in its own right, void of action, void of embodiment, void of that root system, does in fact generally add up to nothing. Mm-hmm. In fact, worse than nothing. Oftentimes it's demoralizing, it's frustrating, it's disappointing, and we find ourselves throwing away the very thing we actually need. We didn't know that we needed the other half of the work, though.
Right.
This is something fairly new to realize that the ideas we're instituting are the beginning of rewiring your neurology, so to speak. Mm-hmm. The greater work is actually in bringing those stories down from the mind into your spine, mm-hmm. so that you begin to move differently, think differently, and act differently. That's what this is about.
Right. I think it's about hanging in there long enough to actually see results.
Absolutely.
And that takes this, it kind of takes a process of allowing things to kind of clear out.
That's true.
So I'm just thinking of this example of food. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a very long time, I believed that if I ate what I enjoyed, I would gain weight. And, you have to go through this process of first recognizing that to be nothing more than a belief that you can then choose to change. And then you have to really swallow that completely with your whole being, and then allow that seed to be planted and it to be brought to fruition. But what has to happen first is all of those lies that you told yourself for years, those also have to be brought to fruition and then released.
Wow.
So what happens is when you commit to yourself and telling yourself, I'm going to eat what I enjoy because I deserve to enjoy my life, you actually have to do that. You have to do that thing, and it's a little bit scary because you're still you haven't experienced the belief yet. It hasn't really taken root yet.
Yeah. But
you have to be willing to write a new story. Yeah. And that's what it requires.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and really, this is a huge gift that Laura has just shared, and one that I probably would have completely missed in this conversation had you not brought it up. In order to institute the new story, the old stories must be released. Oftentimes, this release is embodied. Mm-hmm. And so if the idea is, when I eat sugar, I break out, then in order to release that story for a kinder one that says, my body is capable of metabolizing anything that I thoroughly enjoy and wrap with love and care and, complete presence. Mm-hmm. In order to replace the old story, you may need to begin enjoying some of the things that you have previously disallowed. And because the old beliefs are so...
They're alive. They actually exist.
Yeah.
They have to
They become a part of you in a way.
Yeah, they're in your body. So they have to come to the surface. You have to face the fear and see it and let it go. And it's a scary process because you think, oh, I'm doing the very thing, that I knew I shouldn't do. You have all of these, narratives playing in your head that you're wrong, you're bad. What's really happening is that you're finally seeing the truth. Yeah. And you get to release it.
Yeah. The most terrifying part is when your greatest fear is essentially realized and you break out. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew it.
Right.
That's why it's happening, because you knew it would.
Exactly.
But you've now recognized that whole constellation of ideas to be disempowered, unhelpful, and no longer a part of you. So by actively engaging with it, by choosing to act differently and to root your actions in a deeper reality, when this comes up again, it's a new you that's meeting it. Mm-hmm. There's your ace, there's the beginnings, there's the newness. It's a fresh Laura or a fresh Timothy meeting that particular experience. And perhaps what once was simply a cause and effect result of those unhelpful ideas, now you're actually witnessing the detoxification of those ideas. Mm-hmm. That isn't to say that in every case this needs to happen. Often we've witnessed how quickly our whole being receives, integrates, and becomes the very thing that we have claimed.
Right.
But in those cases, in particular, those cases where the roots go really deep, where the beliefs go really far back, where there's a lot of self-identity and fear connected to the original belief.
An attachment to the past because,
mm-hmm.
It was something that you lived out. We often have a hard time releasing the past. So that's a big part of it.
It is. It's happening very literally. It's mm-hmm. happening in this example. It could be happening very physically. Mm-hmm. And so the fear is I'll break out, or the fear is I'll gain weight, and then you do. And so the thing to do in this case is to realize the context within which this is all playing out now, and to say, oh, I am gaining weight because this is all the dead weight I've been carrying, and it's finally time for it to naturally and organically mm-hmm. dissolve.
Yes.
And the wild thing is, it does. It will. Your skin in this example will clear up. Your weight will plateau and then begin to drop off. You will return to an ideal that you have never met before, that you have never even imagined to be possible for you. Mm-hmm. An ideal which was never given the opportunity to present itself because the inner environment was always too small to hold it.
Right. And I think we're always trying to fix ourselves. When we see something wrong, we're trying to fix it. And that is where these things start perpetuating themselves. Mm-hmm. So instead of trusting our body and trusting the natural, our true self, essentially, we think that there must be something wrong. I've got to fix this, fill in the blank. But what that really does is just, perpetuate this idea that something is wrong. Mm-hmm. So
what you're seeing is not something wrong. What you're seeing is something you think is wrong. Mm-hmm. I think what you're really saying is that nothing is ever wrong. Right. Life is always communicating to you, and it's always directing you toward the next best thing. Mm-hmm. You're constantly being guided. And so to see something in your experience that you have previously interpreted as a sign of imbalance or an indicator that you're doing something wrong, we're really encouraging you to flip that on its head and to recognize every sign, every message, every experience to be communicating something good, something empowering. It's celebrating some part of you which is being called forward, which is being allowed for the first time. That's the opportunity here. Now, this conversation in this day's signature is a far too limited context to expand on this to the extent that it deserves to be expanded upon. If you're listening to this and your head is spinning, realize that we just gave you this is barely the tip of an iceberg. Yeah. I mean, this is is that ice on the water? I can't really tell. It's barely a sliver of what this conversation deserves. It's almost inappropriate or irresponsible for us to share this in this context because it is so significant and does deserve so much more care and so much more attention. This is seer training stuff. There's a reason that, seer training is a more expensive, far more involved process, that it takes place over a great deal of time, because this isn't the sort of thing you root out in 5 minutes on a YouTube video. This is something you have to live out over time, and most of us do need help. I know from my personal versions of this, I've needed, in this case, a lot of help from Laura.
And yeah, same for me. If it weren't for you, I don't think that I would have gotten through those particular breakthroughs that needed to happen, that were waiting to happen. Yeah. It's really important that you have a support system to help you face those fears, because those fears are, like Timothy said, they can have really deep roots. But I'm sure as these day signatures go on, we'll be returning to this topic. So this is just the very first time and an opportunity we've had to touch on it, because we're moving through this sequence. So
I'm not surprised that it came up, though, because this is the content of our everyday conversation. Really, this deeper conversation is one that we're engaged with so totally all the time. Of course, it comes up in these conversations. I just want to, really for our listeners, be very careful to say that if you feel overwhelmed or intimidated by what we've just shared, that's okay. It is initially overwhelming, but what you're sensing in it is the potential for complete emancipation from all of these different subjects that have apparently kept you down your whole life. Yeah. Every one of them is meant to break through to a greater life, a greater light, and a greater story. That's where all of this ties into today. We're meant to live large stories. We are called to. We showed up to. We're here on purpose. You hear us say this all the time. That's what this day's signature is about. How large of a story are you willing to live? Not just think about, not just talk about, not even just write about or journal about, but live. How different can your life become? The answer to that question is always going to be rooted in your willingness to act differently than you have before. Otherwise, you get the same thing you've always gotten, right?
Yes.
This idea of having or getting is directly connected to ownership. And we'll come back, I think, to the 23rd Angel of Eloquence, but we may as well just dive head first into...
Absolutely. I think that's where it makes sense to start, because, again, we're talking about ownership in two different places here. So that's a really main theme.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. So 45th Angel of Nobility walks the pathway of ownership to become the embodiment of the king. The king, of course, in this case is a metaphor. It's the feeling of being that large, that important. Right? We talked about the prince the other day becoming the king. It's kind of that same idea. But what we really want to zoom in on is the pathway of ownership. What does ownership mean? Certainly, on the one hand, it is referring to having, to experiencing, and even possessing all of those things that most inspire and excite you. It is about having it all. We do get to have it all. That's what I hear in this pathway. You get to have it all. But only after you've taken complete ownership of your own story, of your significance within that story, and of the significance of that story within the larger story.
Right.
So, yes, you get to have it all. And it's going to require you to become completely yourself, to throw off all prior bonds, restrictive ideas, and to show up to life in a way that is entirely your own, in a way that has never happened before, it's going to have to be a new story. And you're going to have to own up to that. Ownership is all about claiming the larger narrative, not only in your mind, but in your actions. And so this means you have to walk differently, stand differently, talk differently, think differently. It means that you meet life in a new way, in a confident way, in a clear-minded way, where you recognize, like we talked about yesterday, your direct relationship to life itself, to power itself. Ownership is not taking ownership of your smallness. That is not what we're referring to here. It's not like owning up to your mistakes. Not at all what we're talking about. That's old. Ownership is about owning up to your magnificence, owning up to your perfection, owning up to your beauty. It's looking in the mirror and seeing something you don't like and feeling that, and then saying, no, that is not what I'm doing. I choose to see in myself the same exact beauty that I would see in anyone else. If you have a heart that's open to life, you are not walking through life looking at other people saying, ugly, 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 fat, 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 pimply, pimply, pimply. You're looking out at the world around you and you're saying, wow, beautiful. I love how this one's different from that one. This body type is different from that. That skin color is different from that skin color. You're recognizing originality as such. The challenge for many of us is to turn that exact same kindness, that exact same poet's eye, so to speak, inward toward ourselves. So this day is calling you to look in the mirror and see the king or the queen, to see the largeness. That's what it's calling you to do. And this is seer training. I'm telling you, you say it all the time, free seer training. It's about looking at a bank account with $1 in it and realizing that that has no bearing on your sense of security whatsoever. It's not seeing the dollar and pretending it's $1 million. This isn't a game. This is about realizing that nothing circumstantial, nothing you're looking at on the surface is necessarily equal to what underlies that surface. It's about learning to see through the lens of the truth at everything.
Yes.
That's what this is about. And so you, beginning, of course, with yourself, you take ownership of your largeness, of your magnificence, and in doing so, you necessarily then become humbled by the miracle that you occupy. I
kept hearing the word humility, humility, humility the whole time.
Interesting how it blends in, right?
And that's, I mean, I think that will be that feeling. That's how you know, sort of, that you're on to the embodiment, when you feel humbled.
That's where a lot of these other words come from.
Yeah.
Like reverence, even worship. These are recognitions of your largeness within the grander scale. It's like you see the gift as such.
Yeah.
That's what's humbling. If someone gives you something beautiful and you weren't expecting it, you say, thank you. This is, wow, thank you. You don't even understand why you're receiving it. That feeling is the feeling. So when we're talking about taking ownership of your largeness, what we are not saying is pretend to be bigger than you are. We're not talking about this pseudo sovereignty that is often misrepresented in the mainstream as becoming assertive or becoming arrogant or pushing your weight around or trying to essentially perform sovereignty or perform largeness. Not at all. We're talking about growing such deep mental roots, such great awareness into the reality of how large you are that you don't have to pretend or perform a thing. You know you are large. You stand tall because why wouldn't you? You've been given this great gift of life, and it doesn't matter if you literally can't stand. It doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair or in a bed and incapable of the kind of, metaphorical movements we're describing. We're talking about the sheer significance of your existence. That's what you are growing roots into. That's where all of this magnificence comes from. That's where your sovereignty comes from. It comes from knowing that you are a pivotal contributor to life. You are a participant in the act of living. And no matter how you go about doing it, your existence, your part in this play absolutely matters. That's what we're talking about. And when you really get that, then you feel, you feel humble.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel humbled. You don't create this big feeling and then like an accordion gets squished by, who am I to, that's also not what we're talking about. Can you get the sense there's an equilibrium here? And this equilibrium is natural. It's extremely natural once you carve away all of the nonsense stories that you've been taught about sovereignty and about humility and all of these things. Often, there is a surface level, mainstream, acceptable version of an idea, and it is almost always opposite of the truth. The truth beneath it may, in fact, use the same word, like sovereignty, like what we're describing here. But that truth beneath it is authentic, natural, unavoidable, and always available the moment you can get past the surface distraction.
Yeah.
My hope is that in sharing this, we're using the best words we can within, again, this very limited context. My hope is that some part of what we're attempting to show you is getting through. It can feel abstract. The mind sometimes gets really twisted up about this sort of thing. The idea that there's an observable truth, but then an underlying truth can be really tough, or a surface truth and an underlying truth. They're both observable, by the way. You can see either one, but which you choose to see matters.
Yeah.
Same here. Ownership is claiming your significance without having to assert that significance. It's a sheer knowing, and it's a very like celebratory knowing, not an aggressive knowing. Right. I hope that this is distinguishing itself well enough in the words.
Yeah. Well, I think the other angel is what sort of helps
temper that, explain it, define it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Which this Angel of Eloquence, who walks the pathway of simplicity, is really saying that don't get too concerned about these nuances here, because it's really quite simple. And the forgotten sense is a perfect example. Yeah. It's red or green. Does it feel good or does it not feel good? Yeah.
Does it cause you to feel small, or does it cause you to feel large? Over and over again, we're told that the truth will always elevate. The truth will always expand. The truth will always uplift. The truth will always feel good. Always.
The truth is obvious and kind and clear.
Yes. And we certainly know this now through direct personal experience. The truth is always kind, obvious and clear. Yes, I love that. It's so true. Anything else, anything that makes you feel small, anything that makes you feel worried, anything that makes you feel afraid is not equal to the truth. Consider what that means. Here we are dealing in the pathway of simplicity now. But you're 100% right. There's a direct tie between simplicity and ownership. But we need to understand simplicity before you get at how very simple this idea of ownership is. So the simplicity here within, in the forgotten sense terms, is red or green. Green is that which expands and uplifts. Red is that which minimizes, right, or limits. If someone says, I'll use an example from when I was growing up. Someone comes up to me and says, "You're fat and ugly." It hurts for a reason. The reason is not that I am in fact fat and ugly and that sucks. Which is exactly what we generally snap to, correct, initially. The truth is that if that hurt, if that felt uncomfortable, if that was like grating against some deeper part of me, it's because it was a bold-faced lie. Yeah. That's what happened, right? The truth is the opposite of that. If someone says, again, personal story, "You're so boring," man, that used to just drive me nuts. The reason is because it was never true. Never true. I'm totally, perfectly interesting. I don't need to worry about that. But there was a great length of time where I was worried about that. I'm the most boring person at the party. No, actually, and ironically, I was always the most interesting person at the party, even if I never opened my mouth. The truth is always in the opposite direction of what hurts. This is something else that we've been taught. So when you realize how simple this is, you get to go inside. You get to pay attention to your own ideas, your own agreements, your own assumptions, your own, imaginations. And you get to watch what's happening in there. And those things that cause you to feel small, you can recognize them to be lies. You can recognize them to be misaligned with truth. Or we could simply say that they're misunderstandings.
Absolutely. They are misunderstandings.
Yep. Anything that causes you to feel a sense of relief, anything that causes you to feel like you can breathe a little deeper, a little more freely, anything that causes you to feel excitement, you found it. You found the truth. That is how simple it is. So when you take that very, very simple mechanism of signaling.
Right. And replacing. I think it's important to also not just negate something, but actively replace it with the truth.
That's true. Absolutely. Yes. So if you recognize something to be dissonant, red, so to speak, your opportunity then is to turn it upside down and
tell the proper
discover
story.
The truth, replace it with the proper story. Yeah. And that's exactly how this connects to ownership, because we have this inherent mechanism, this resource built into our physical experience, emotions. It's the way you feel. We have this resource built in, which is continually helping us to define ourselves within that greater context of truth. So anything you can connect to as beautiful or inspiring or uplifting is your new opportunity to digest that story, to replace the old one with this better feeling one. This isn't better feeling as some flimsy thing. This isn't weak, childish nonsense. This is the very mechanism of interpretation and alignment that we have been given as a support system inherent to every one of us. It's built in. You can't get away from it. It's why we all feel so much. It's interesting that very mechanism is the most attacked resource in the human experience. And most people in the modern world, especially in this society of hustling, Western society in particular, where it's about hustling and earning, we have no time, no space, no interest in feeling. So we just silence it. We just subdue that, when in fact that very thing is the only resource capable of orienting us, of connecting us to a direct conscious awareness of that destiny that we're all meant to live out. So as we begin to reclaim this, we utilize what I would refer to as our single greatest resource in life as a means of what I would refer to as wayfinding. This is the practice of wayfinding. Ownership is about finding your way back to your own largeness and back to the greater story you're meant to live out. You came to live out. I couldn't help but imagine The Lord of the Rings. I love to use The Lord of the Rings as an example of what an epic story might look like. And in The Lord of the Rings, you have, forgive me if this is nerdy and you've never seen Lord of the Rings, but I think at this point, most of us have, so it's fair enough. There's one character, Aragorn, central character to the storyline, and leading up to the beginning of the Lord of the Rings story, Aragorn has spent the better part of his entire life hiding in the shadows. He doesn't even go by his own name. He's known as Strider. As far as he's concerned, he's nothing. He doesn't have a name. He's a wraith. He's a shadow. He's invisible, and he wants to be. A great part of the Lord of the Rings narrative has to do with this particular character first reclaiming his own name, then coming out into the light so that he can actually move in service to a much, much larger story. And along the way, what he discovers is something he's known all along, the very thing he was hiding from all along, which is that he's in fact a king. He's of royal blood, and he's meant to ascend the throne, and in doing so, of course, save the world. It's all a part of the story. Of course it is. It always is. And so the third movie in this sequence, third book as well, is called Return of the King. And it's really kind of centering on Aragorn reclaiming his place.
Reclaiming his true name and his true role.
Yep, true name, true role. Bam. Now you have someone who was once shrunken and shrouded in the shadows, standing tall and beautiful and glowing in the light of splendor, which, if you know the movie, it's totally humble. No part of it is performed or aggressive. It is just clear awareness and complete ownership. He takes ownership of it. He's different.
Yeah.
That's our story too. If we could name this day's signature something, it would be the return of the king. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. This is a metaphor. Understand that your story is large, and it will be exactly as large as you allow it to be. And it will continue to grow only insofar as you permit it to. Mm-hmm. That's what we're doing. Every one of us is called out of the shadows. We do this not by hiring a therapist and getting to work on the shadows. We do this by just stepping out of the shadows.
Right.
Like it's that simple.
Right. Like,
imagine if he had done shadow work. Mm-hmm. Aragorn never would have become the king. He'd still be swinging at, phantoms in the dark.
Right.
That's not what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
This is about replacement. You replace the disempowered story with a larger one. You replace the one that hurts with one that doesn't.
That's the true shadow work. If we want to say what that process really is, the correct process is to see that the story you're telling yourself is not your true story. Yeah. and to replace it with the correct story, the true story, your story, the one that feels amazing and good. And that's how you know it's your story, because it feels amazing and good.
Yeah. That same exact story won't feel amazing and good to the next person over, because they have their own version of that. That's why when people get very critical of, just feeling good as if it's some floppy thing, I can't help but like just laugh at that broken logic. Mm-hmm. What feels good to you is totally specific to you. We were just last night watching a Netflix documentary about this awesome character, this beautiful man who became and remains one of the very best pasta makers in the world. Pasta? I told you on our drive yesterday, that's so random. Random, making pasta. He might as well have become the best mop head maker in the world. It's like, where did that come from? The fact is, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. This guy found his story. He returned to the kingdom of, in this case, pasta making. Mm-hmm. And now he is doing such remarkable work. Yeah. And that work extends beyond him to include everyone who supported that process. I mean, it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, the impact of his story is huge.
It's profound. Yeah. And all it did was verify what we're seeing and saying here. Yeah, we use examples like Lord of the Rings. Fine, that's a fantasy. That's a fairy tale. If you don't like it, don't use it. Use this one. This is a real life person doing a real life thing. And where did he end up? Did he end up as president of the United States? Was it some great big thing like you might expect it to be? No. It was bigger. Mm-hmm. It was much better for this particular man to become the best pasta maker in the world than it would have been for him to become president, because this was his story to live out. And that's what made him feel extremely fulfilled. That's what feeling good means. That's what we mean by it. What is that thing in your life, or those things in your life, that actually produce fulfillment? Because that's what matters. And we all know what doesn't produce fulfillment. And amazingly, we're often giving ourselves so wholly, our time, our energy, our expectations, all of it, to those things that do not fulfill. And then we're scratching our head trying to figure out why it didn't take. Mm-hmm. It's because deep down, every one of us knows exactly where we're meant to be. The only thing required is enough self-honesty and courage to find it and enact it. And there's your swords, and there's your wands, and there's what we are called to live out today.
I think what you were also describing is the embodiment of heart in the 23rd angel.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's great. Heart. Mm-hmm. Because it has your whole heart.
Yes.
And anything short of that.
And it fills your whole heart.
Oof. Yes. That's interesting, actually, because it is possible to offer your whole heart to something that doesn't fill your whole heart. Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting, because in those cases, you're not failing. You simply haven't yet found the thing. We talked a little bit about this yesterday.
We did.
It is extremely good and even necessary to offer your whole heart to things. Imagine if you were clothes shopping. Mm-hmm. You would have to try on a number of different articles before you found the one that was perfect. Maybe you go to one store and you try on every article of clothing that they have, and none of them do that for you.
Right.
You feel like there's nothing out there for me.
Well, I mean, again, that example of the pasta maker. He didn't just wake up as, a baby and know he was going to be this world famous, like, artist of pasta and carry on this Italian tradition. He had to find his way there. And it appeared to come through many missteps. That was part of the story.
Absolutely.
And that's I think, another piece that we need to recognize is that our whole path, no matter what it looks like, is part of the story. And that's taking ownership of the whole story that is yours.
When you do that, you redeem all of the steps that came before. You place them in their appropriate context.
And there's no such thing as failure.
Boom. And so you try on every article of clothing in the store, and not one does that for you. You give your whole heart to the process. You know you're on the hunt for something, and you have not found it, and it feels demoralizing, and you don't understand why, and you think you've exhausted all your options, but you haven't even considered all the other stores that remain for you to visit. It's a silly example, but it's actually something we live out. So understand that first and foremost, you have to give your whole heart to whatever it is that you are sensing that potential within. And that, by the way, takes such a great deal of courage that most people are not doing that. Most people are half-heartedly delivering some tiny portion of themselves to something they don't, frankly, give a shit about. What we're talking about is giving your whole heart to your life until you identify that particular thing that not only can you give your whole heart to, but fills your heart, gives back to you in such a way that you now have more energy. You are overflowing with the quality, the content and the quality of that exchange. Okay, now you've got something. Now you found your pasta.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people maybe watching this will be like, wow, well, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
But I just don't think that that's possible for everybody. And we're here to tell you it is.
Yeah.
If you take this idea and you swallow it, it will open that possibility up for you to find the thing that fills your whole heart. It's a willingness to really live that story. You have to be willing and choose it. You have to be consciously choosing it and open to it before it can actually be possible in your life, because otherwise you're basically ruling out that as a possibility. So that's something. That's something to note.
Yes, I will admit that every time you said possible or possibility, all I could think is that everything is possible. I was just waiting for my time to deliver the dad joke, But you're 100% correct. You realize that you're not dealing in I almost got myself. Yeah. You're not dealing in only in yes. You're actually dealing in potential realities, and you get to choose. Yes. And you don't have to stop choosing until you find the one that fills you. And then all you do is continue to choose that. It's a beautiful process. It's meant to play out as an epic narrative. That's the idea. So the narratives that begin in the mind ensure first and foremost that they are aligned with an underlying truth that is supportive of who you are and what you came to express. Once you've done that, practice it. Play it on repeat. Replace everything that is not equal to that, and most significantly start to live that way. Live out the larger story, even if it's terrifying, even if it means staring yourself in the face in the mirror, not liking what you see, and literally, verbally reclaiming the beauty that is inherent to who you are. You've got to scrape out those eyes that are not capable of perceiving truth so that you can finally come close enough to experience it for yourself. We talked about pulling out the one eye so the other side eye can see clearly. All of these things, it's all connected. This is one of our favorite frequencies, the 45. It's not some great big collective vortex day. It's not like there's anything objectively special about the day, except for the fact that every single day is objectively special.
True.
And of course, it is a personal vortex day.
Well, but I was gonna just call.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So yesterday was a special day because it was a collective vortex day. We had the 44 as the frequency, which also happens to be the frequency for the whole year. So we had the day overlapping with the year frequency. That's what made it a vortex day.
Yep.
The neat thing about these frequencies of the year is that they also kind of move in this sequence where this year's the 44, but 2025 is going to be the frequency of the 45.
Yeah, the year signature for 2025 is the day signature we're working with today, the 45. Right.
So this is almost like a preview of next year. Mm-hmm. So it's important to take note of this, like, hey, this is kind of a special day. It's an important day because next year is going to be all about the 45.
Yesterday, we talked about the 44. That's this year's signature. It's about power. What's coming is story.
Yeah.
We get to experience the flavor of that today, but realize that the two go hand in hand and move in a particular sequence. Mm-hmm. You are utilizing your personal power in a particular way all day, every day, whether you know it or not. What's being invited here is a capacity to utilize that power on purpose. We would say utilize it properly. To utilize that power properly is to align it with the greater story so that it can move effortlessly, so that ultimately it can move you into the greater story that you are here to tell. That's the ultimate expression of this. That's the most fulfilling expression of this, where it's not this great struggle. It's something inevitable, and it sweeps you up into this epic that you yourself get to be surprised by. You're no longer the one charting the trajectory. You're not trying to write the script. You're, as Richard Rudd would say, you're both reading and writing the story simultaneously, as every step you take kind of drafts the next sentence, even as you take it. Mm-hmm. You get to be just as surprised by your story as anyone, but that's only possible if you haven't squeezed yourself into a tiny, Groundhog's Day world of a smaller story. No. It's meant to grow. It's meant to evolve. It's meant to change. It's meant to sweep you off your feet. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter what scale that's on. It could be making mop heads or becoming the best pasta maker in the world or becoming the president. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
What matters is that it's yours. That's what makes it special. That's what will have the impact. And most significantly of all, that's the only thing which will ever fulfill you. And it's all held on this basis of enjoyment, your willingness to permit your enjoyment, to love your life, and to meet it as completely as you possibly can, no matter what, knowing that there is no such thing as a bad sign. You are never at odds with your experience, and everything you encounter is absolutely showing up for you to help guide you to this larger story. It's all on purpose. Mm-hmm. That's what we're here to learn. That's what we're here to live. And that's what we're here to share. Yeah. Ooh, mic drop, right? Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that we wanted to share?
The only other thing I thought is maybe we wanted to read the amplified frequency from the frequency tables for the 45, I like that. Which would be 450.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the amplified frequency of 45 is 450. We do have an entry that we were excited to share, so let's go ahead and read that.
So that would be, everything within us calls us forward. Life itself propels us in response.
Everything within us calls us forward. Even, amazingly enough, as we've talked about today, even the fears, even the smallness, all of those things, believe it or not, are telling you something. Your responsibility is to interpret what they're telling you. That is what we have not been trained to do. This is a shameless plug moment. You need to purchase the Forgotten Sense. If you have not experienced it, you need that because it gives you the information you need to properly interpret even the smallness, even the fear, even the terror in such a way that you are self-empowered to grow up into the larger story. Mm-hmm. When you do this, you realize that literally everything within you calls you forward. You don't need to push or press or force anything in your life because the real thing is dragging you forward. You can't help it. You can't get away from it. It's all going to happen. Your destiny is unavoidable. Isn't that awesome? Aragorn was always going to become the king. You can only hide in the shadows for so long. The moment you're equipped to interpret what's happening, you come out of the shadows. Yes. That's what happens. Wow. And then the whole story plays out.
Yes. Yeah. This is our moment. This is the collective moment.
Yep.
I mean, we're in the 45 as soon as January 1st. This is our moment to begin the real story.
Yep. The moment you step out, life itself propels you in response. There is no avoiding this. It is meant to be effortless. It is meant to be beautiful. It literally is meant to be epic. And all of that is entirely your own the moment you claim it, the moment you retain ownership of that largeness.
Mm-hmm.
You get to have it all. But first you have to say, I'll take it.
I want it. Yeah. Give it to me.
Yeah. So let's do that today. Babe,
okay.
Awesome. Cheers.
Yes. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation, as always.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look very much forward to seeing you tomorrow. More beautiful lessons await.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was. Okay.
Okay.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.